Hello, I'm Ben Brown and this is the Iran War Today, our daily briefing that brings you up to date with all you need to know on the war and the current peace talks as well. Well, let's start with some of today's key developments. Will agreements reached between the United States and Iran actually hold as arguments emerge over what has been promised over nuclear inspections? The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is touring the Gulf, trying to reassure allies who've been hit hard by Iran's retaliatory campaign. As thousands of residents return to southern Lebanon because of the latest ceasefire there, 2 people have been killed as Israeli troops open fire near a bulldozer clearing a road. The UN's shipping agency announces the start of the evacuation of more than 11,000 seafarers through the Strait of Hormuz as traffic starts to move much quicker on the waterway. Well, the US President Donald Trump says that Iran has fully and completely agreed to allow nuclear inspectors to return to the country long into the future. But this claim has been denied by Iran itself, which says no plans exist and that substantive negotiations on nuclear issues have yet to begin. Well, the disagreement and the uncertainty over what has been agreed and by who has certainly been a feature of the negotiations between the two sides so far. Let's listen to Vice-President JD Vance speaking on Monday about the nuclear issue.
We have the Iranians allowing weapons inspectors, nuclear inspectors into their country for the first time in a long time. We're obviously going to bolster that inspection regime to make sure they can never have a nuclear weapon.
That's Vice President JD Vance. We've also been hearing from President Trump himself. Let's have a listen.
You want to see trouble? Let them have a nuclear weapon. We're doing very well with Iran. They've been decimated, and we're making a deal with them, and we'll see how that all goes. And right now, as you probably heard yesterday, we had 19 barrels of oil, 19 million barrels of oil come off, and that's the biggest in the history of the Strait, the Hormuz Strait. Our stock market is through the roof, and oil prices are tumbling. We actually hit for a moment today. In fact, I think it's going to break it, $70 a barrel. That's lower than we were when we started. And it's been amazing. And the big thing is Iran will not have a nuclear weapon.
President Trump there insisting Iran won't have a nuclear weapon. Let's go to our Washington correspondent, Bern de Boosman. He says that, but at the same time, there seems to be real differences between the Iranian side and the American side about the question of nuclear inspections.
Well, President Trump and other members of the administration have insisted that Iran has agreed to have IAEA inspectors come in Iran and enforce what President Trump has now taken to calling nuclear honesty. In a Truth Social post several hours ago, President Trump suggested that he would be willing to walk away from any negotiations during the 60-day ceasefire extension if that hadn't been agreed. And in the last hour or so, we heard from a U.S. official who told us that the administration essentially believes that any Iranian denials that they've allowed in inspectors, that message is for a domestic audience inside Iran. So at the moment, all signs seem to indicate that the Trump administration is quite confident that there would be nuclear inspectors. President Trump, after all, has said that the nuclear issue is 99% of what he wanted when he launched Operation Fury in February. And I think he's made quite clear he's willing to walk away from the negotiations and implement the blockade again, if not go to military action if Iran weren't to comply with that.
And President Trump, I mean, he's keen to see these negotiations succeed, isn't he? Because he doesn't want this war to drag on.
He's still facing enormous domestic pressure here about the price of petrol. As you see, one of his messages over the last few days has been one of how many barrels of oil, 19 million barrels of oil getting through the Strait of Hormuz and onto the world market. That's also for a domestic audience here in the United States, for people who are concerned about how long this runs, how long petrol prices will still be higher that they have to pay every day. So he's very keen to have a negotiated settlement and to be able to prove with concrete figures, as he just indicated in that sound clip we just heard, that things are improving and that the price of petrol is going down.
Bernd, do stay with us. We're going to hear more from you in a minute. But of course, the conflict in Lebanon is inextricably linked to the success or otherwise of those peace negotiations between Iran and the United States. Well, state media in Lebanon say that 2 people have been killed when Israeli soldiers opened fire on a group near a bulldozer clearing a road in the southern town of Nabatea. Iran has repeatedly requested that they withdraw as part of the ceasefire arrangements. It follows 3 days during which ceasefire in Lebanon held, and thousands of residents did begin returning to their homes. A statement by the Israeli military says it has struck armed terrorists who posed an immediate threat to its soldiers. But it's not clear if that refers to the same incident. Hezbollah, meanwhile, has accused Israel of a blatant violation of the ceasefire. Now, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is currently in the Gulf region. He is set to visit the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait and Bahrain over the next couple of days. Mr. Rubio is going to be discussing a range of regional priorities, including Iran and Lebanon, which Iran has repeatedly said is intrinsically linked to any overall peace agreement.
Lebanon is a sovereign country. It has a government. And when it comes to Lebanon and what's happening inside of Lebanon, we're going to negotiate and deal directly with the Lebanese government. I spoke to President Ayoun along with the Vice President a few moments ago, spoke to him on Friday. Their people are there now on the ground directly. So the reason why that issue is over, now there's an Iranian issue with regards to Lebanon, and that is their support and sponsorship of Hezbollah. And so that factor will be discussed as part of our conversations with the Iranians. But as far as the future of Lebanon belongs to the Lebanese people through their sovereign elected government. And that's who we're going to be working with.
So that is US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Let's go back to our Washington correspondent, Bernd Debusman. And the question of Lebanon, so important really to the future of these peace negotiations, these 60 days of talks, and yet in some ways very unpredictable what's happening there.
It is very unpredictable, and I think in recent days the Trump administration has been very frustrated not only with Israel, as we've heard before. President Trump has lashed out at Israel several times in the last several weeks about how this issue and Israeli operations in Lebanon could scupper any further negotiations, but also with Hezbollah and Iran. Marco Rubio has essentially put the onus on Iran, saying that there can't be a regional peace if Iran continues to fund these proxy groups in the Middle East, such as Hezbollah and Lebanon, or the Houthis in Yemen. And I think there's a kind of knowledge within the administration that this issue, perhaps more than other issues, is more unpredictable. Of course, Hezbollah is not party to these negotiations between the United States government and Israel and Lebanon's central government in Beirut, which means that any number of things could happen that could quickly escalate. And Iran has made it very clear they see Lebanon as a second front in the same conflict. So I think any administration efforts to kind of put those in 2 separate pots will quickly kind of come to a glaring reality that that's not the way Tehran sees things.
Bernd, thank you very much once again. Bernd Debusman there in Washington. Well, the United Nations Shipping Agency, the International Maritime Organization, has announced the start of the evacuation of more than 11,000 seafarers who've been stranded in the Gulf. Vessels are being contacted individually with instructions on sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. It comes as Iran's ambassador to the UN in Geneva said the Strait of Hormuz will remain open during the 60-day period of the talks. Analysts said that traffic through the strait hit its highest level since the start of the conflict at the end of February. Well, Mu Zhu is a senior oil analyst with the commodities data company Kepler.
I think it certainly shows that things are moving toward a positive situation. But right now, we need to realize that a lot of those passages, especially the exits of the Strait of Hormuz, come from the clearance of the backlog. Right now, we still see around 75 million barrels of non-Iranian crude stranded inside the Persian Gulf. Right now, Iran shows that vessels can come out and free of charge and also safely, but it's not enough to encourage ship owners to come back into the Persian Gulf to haul oil. So we are still a long way before reaching to the pre-war situation. The new interest is still quite limited and comes from those ship owners who has a relatively high tolerance of risk, whereas for the mainstream ship owners and those national oil companies from Asian refineries or Asian countries, they are still reluctant to go in because they don't know what they're facing and whether they can come out in time.
Well, all these conflicting statements highlight the uncertainty that's facing efforts to halt a war that has upended the Middle East. But the diplomacy does continue. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian is actually visiting Pakistan at the moment, meeting those officials who've helped to mediate negotiations between Iran and the United States. Pakistan has been acting as a mediator between the two countries. In a social media post, President Pezeshkian said progress in the negotiations depends on adhering to precise obligations. Let's talk then to Parham Gobadi, who is from BBC Persian. Thanks very much for being with us, Parham. First of all, on the negotiations, there seems to have been some conflict between Iran and the United States about the question of nuclear inspections. But what's your sense of how these talks have been going?
So regarding nuclear inspection, it's possible that Iran makes some concessions at the end of the day. The Iranian authorities at the moment, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson today said that they haven't agreed to inspectors entering Iranian territory and inspecting nuclear facilities yet, but it's possible and imaginable if in the long run, if their demands are met, they would agree to that. However, what the Iranian authorities are saying that this is their red line, at least to this moment, is that they would not agree to halt the enrichment altogether. So they would stop or suspend all their nuclear activities. And that is exactly what Donald Trump wants, to stop Iranian activities altogether, zero enrichment, as what Donald Trump says. And Iran says, that's my red line, and I want to keep the right of enriching uranium, even if it's, a tiny percentage, like in the past JCPOA, that it was like 3.67%.
As I mentioned, Iran's president is currently in Pakistan. What do you think is the Iranian sense of how these talks are going? Are they broadly sort of satisfied and think they are making progress?
They are, because they've managed to lift some sanctions. They're managing to export their petroleum and petrochemical products. At the same time, some of their assets have been unfrozen. There is, again, different narratives. The United States says that those are only for buying medicine and food exclusively from the United States. However, Iranians are saying it's not only from the United States. We are allowed to freely choose any country to buy food and medicine. But one of the points of contention right now is, again, Strait of Hormuz, because today, apart from Masoud Pezeshkian, Mohammad Baqir Ghalibaf, who is Iranian's chief negotiator, along with Iranian foreign minister, are in Oman. And the reason is that they are talking with Omanis to have to find some control over the Strait of Hormuz. So today, yes, the Strait of Hormuz is open, the ships are going, but tomorrow, who is going to be in charge and who is going to be in control? And after the 60 days, will Iranian take some transfer fees or some tolls from the ships? That's really important, and we have to wait and see what happens and how it develops.
Farhan, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Finally, to the World Cup, because Iran's players have left a message in the dressing room in Los Angeles on Sunday, thanking the people of LA for their hospitality. Now, among the messages, at least one included a hashtag referring to the bombing of the Minab school in Iran on February the 28th, the start of the war, when it's thought 168 people were killed in an American strike. Now, the players also paid tribute to the Iranians who gave their heart, voice and soul for Iran in the two matches so far. Iran play their final group match against Egypt in Seattle. Well, whether you are joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or television, thank you so much for your time and your company. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.